Hey, this is Ed McCarthy, CEO of Echelon Performance. Welcome back to Coaching Sidebar. My guest today, and I did look this up, we have 288 mutual connections on LinkedIn. I want to say this is the king of clarity, and Steve is the founder of Impactivity, but Steve is a longtime friend, colleague, mentor, guru to me. If you don't know Steve Woodruff, we're going to get into who Steve Woodruff is, but my guest today is Steve Woodruff, the king of clarity. Steve, welcome to Coaching Sidebar.
Always great to talk to you, my friend.
It is always great to talk to you, and under so many different circumstances, whether it's I've had a barbecue in your backyard with you when I first met you. We've been at L10 together. You've been in my offices. So it's so good to catch up with you. But you and I have been talking over the last couple of weeks with regard to your new book that's coming out. You've done a lot of research into that. You have another book that you've published previously. And it all centers in on a theme that I find incredibly compelling. As you know, we are in the language business as well. And the core theme of your work, your research, is clarity. So I'm just going to hit you with a big question first. Why clarity? Why is it so critical? And what was there a specific instance or experiences which really made it so compelling for you?
It was a buildup of a lot of different things. So when I was younger and in my college career, and then shortly after college, where I was doing some teaching and leading groups, it was about coming up with a well thought out and well articulated presentation of stuff. At that point, I had no business experience whatsoever. And then my first professional business experience was in sales. And I had to learn how to take ideas, how to take words and communicate them effectively. And probably 95% of my efforts were horrendous, in the early days, because, I was not a natural salesperson. I was struggling. I was trying to figure out how to communicate. And so I managed to succeed in sales, not because I'm a great schmoozer or not because I'm a great salesperson, because I'm stubborn and use words. So I went on to do more marketing and then consulting. And in each of these roles, it all came down to how are you going to design words to persuade people? How are you going to come up with words? And then when social media hit, I had to learn how to compress and distill words into even smaller packages. So it took some years before I arrived at the word clarity, but all along, for decades, I've been working with and struggling with this idea of what does it mean for human beings to communicate effectively? It's been, if not an obsession, it's been an absolute necessity, basically, for all my professional life.
Yeah. And it's, once I really, as you evolved this idea and started to think about it as, it's hard to really overstate the work that you've done in this area. And I can speak from personal experience just with regard to the work that you've helped me with. And I'm going back probably 10 or 15 years, and I was really struggling to articulate. I never struggled to articulate what we do or how we do it, but to actually get somebody excited about why we do it. Yeah. And I think once you helped me with that, it was literally a game changer. And I cannot be the only person that says this. You must have a lot of people that feel like that literally the light bulb goes off for them.
For me, a lot of this came down when I started to really wrestle with these ideas of clarity. I wasn't using the word clarity. I was using the word brand. I was helping companies to brand themselves because I noticed throughout my career that companies often did a horrible job of articulating a brand value. It's just a bunch of gobbledygook or mixed messages, and that bothered me all the time. So at first I started calling it brand therapy. And then I realized that what I've arrived at in helping people articulate their brand goes way beyond professional brand, it actually goes into career, it goes into personal purpose, it goes into everything. So I got away from the word brand, and that's when I landed on clarity. And one of the things that really made clarity work for me was stealing or adopting the standard journalistic questions: who, what, why, how, where. And if you can articulate as a company or as an individual the what exactly you do, the who you do it for, so I go for whom instead of just who, how you do it, what is your superpower, why do you do it, what's the pain and the need, and then where do you do it? Is this local? Is this global? Is it in this sector? Or is it in this part? Any company or individual that can articulate answers to those questions has a foundation. And so those very straightforward questions, which I work with people on to get answers to, actually turn the light on for people. And the problem is that often for ourselves, if we try to do it ourselves, as you know, I use the phrase often, you can't read the label of the jar you're in. Mm-hmm. So we have a jumbled amount of stuff in our heads, and often we need someone from the outside to help us see the themes and bring to the surface the specifics and then put it into new words. And that's what I do.
And you're expert at that. And the way that you just explained that was incredibly clear. I'm thinking, man, this you walk the talk. You really do. It's powerful. Let me ask you this: the way that you break that down, the five, the journalistic questions, it seems so clear, right? Mm-hmm. The way that you break that down, but it's something, and you have made, I think, like a cottage industry of finding people's websites or marketing information that is the antithesis of this. Uh-huh. And if you're watching this on LinkedIn, I would say go over to Steve's profile, because I can guarantee there's a bunch of examples there of gobbledygook. What gets in the way? Like, what makes this so hard? I think one of the things you said is perspective, right? If you're in the jar, it's hard to read the label on the outside. But what are the other things that just confound people who are trying to clarify their message?
Yeah, there are several things. So perspective is one. One of the biggest problems at a personal level, at a company level, is simply trying to say too much. It's the TMI problem, the too much information problem. And we have, and I experienced this for years, this compulsion to try to get everything out. And it wasn't until I started to get a little more familiar with brain science and realized that the human brain has a very limited capacity for attention and focus, and that I've got to get my message across really fast. That's what tipped me off on the idea that it's actually negative to say too much. Less is more. And any company that wants to be memorable and to have a focused direction needs to bring the words down to the fewest, briefest expression possible. And that's the art form. That is not easy to do. And as you know, because you and I have been through this exercise, and I've done it with multiple people, it can take hours of wrestling with key words, of constructing sentences, of creating analogies to finally boil a lot of information into these nice little compact packages.
No, that's the thing. It's one of those things that the end result feels so good. You just feel this sense of, it's like there's a wow factor to what you do. Is it fair to say that you are a really good listener? Like, you're an exceptional listener, because you and I have worked together. And I think what helps you is that you take a lot in. You don't rush to judgment. You have this ability to, and you might hear me start talking and you'd be like, oh, okay, I know where this is going. But you have this ability to to keep those filters or those preconceptions away. I find you to be an exceptional listener. Do you think that's part of not your process, but do you think that's something that helps you with this?
Yeah, it's one of the things that contributes to my superpower. So you have to be able to listen and you have to be able to draw people out. So I do what I call story asking. And, we all know what storytelling is. Well, I do story asking. I ask people for their stories and then I listen. And when I'm listening, I'm looking for keywords and themes. I'm looking for the stuff that keeps coming up. And as I ask for success stories, failure stories, origin stories, background stories, you begin to get a sense of who this person or this company is based on those stories. So there's no way you can do this without being a really good listener and without having this, and this I just call magic. I mean, this is just the way I'm built. An analytical ability to connect dots, even in things that don't seem to connect right away intuitively. So you've got to be able to look at a bunch of things and say, well, have you ever thought about that this way? Or how this could apply to that market? Or if somebody's in the middle of a career transition, say, look, you've got these strengths, but have you ever thought about being a consultant in this area? And often people are so locked into a certain way of thinking and acting and working, they've never thought, they've never made the connection. And I just love those epiphanies. I live for it. It makes me so happy when somebody says, yeah, that's who I am. And you know what? I could do that. Oh, man, that makes me so excited because then it turns into a little more of coaching and saying, okay, here's how this could work. Here's how you might want to start this. Here's how you can put words around that. Here's how you might want to change your LinkedIn profile and turn it right into some practical work.
Yeah. And having been on the receiving end of that, I can tell that it gives you you have a great deal of fulfillment when you're working with a client, when you're working with organizations. But on this end as well, like for somebody who's been through the process, there is an incredible sense of relief and release to say, like, that's it. That's exactly it. Right. Yeah. And my first thought was like, wow, like there's a sense of like, finally. It's
well,
been. Yeah.
As you mentioned this morning, I wrote a post on LinkedIn about having the power of a single word. And in two of my earlier career ventures, each one lasting 10 years, I did a lot of sales, I did a lot of marketing, and I never felt completely comfortable in my own skin. I felt like I was trying to force myself to be something. And then finally, in my mid 40s or maybe early 50s, I recognized that the key word for me was I'm a consultant. I'm not a salesperson. I'm not a numbers quota push it guy. I made myself sell. I still make myself sell. I don't love it still. So I sell, but my DNA is as a consultant. And I arrived at that when I saw somebody that I eventually hired in one of my roles who was a fabulous natural salesperson. She could charm the socks off of anybody. And I looked at her and I said, that's a salesperson.
Yeah.
I'm not. What am I? I'm a consultant. And that really liberated me when it was time to go out on my own to say, that's what I need to be. Mm-hmm. I fix things. I figure stuff out. I work with ideas. I work with words. I help people go from this point to this point. It's that analytical part. I'm not a salesperson. I'm not a rah-rah coach. I'm a figure it out guy.
Yeah. You're not pushing a product into, you're so other focused, right? You're thinking about the needs of the person you're working with. Mm-hmm. And then thinking, all right, is there an opportunity? Does it make sense? How can I help them? Not, let me just sell you this thing. Yeah.
Which never felt good to me. And I respect people that can sell, that really just can sell and join to a good and other-centered heart. So they're not just looking to, shove a bunch of stuff that nobody needs. And I've seen plenty of the bad type of salespeople, as you have and as we all have. And I've seen some really good salespeople.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, good. But I had to release myself from many, many years of internal pressure to be that. And what really helped me get on that track, Ed, was the Now Discover Your Strengths book. And when I went through the Strengths Finder and it came back and said, and I was always been fascinated by personality assessments. So when it came back and I suddenly realized, oh, wait a minute, look at these keywords. Look at who this, yeah, that's who I am. And it was that book that really pushed me into the clarity, the career coaching, the branding, because it's all based on strengths and keywords. That's what I'm always after. What are you great at? What does your company excel at? What do people love about you? What's your superpower? If you can get a hold of those things, then you can know what direction to take.
That's really powerful. That was an important book for me too. I remember I was working with a client. That was like in the early 2000s, and their entire learning and development organization had gone through and was using that book. And they had like their strengths outside their doors, and and they're like, if you're going to work with us, you got to read this. And they gave me a copy, and it came back, and I was like, wow, this is. I have never, and to you, we've been in the business long enough. There are a lot of assessments out there, but when that came back, I'm like, that's exactly right. It's powerful. All right, man. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back because there's something I want to talk to you about, and that is who you consider to be the audience for your next book, because I know you have a big idea around that. So you want to take a quick break and talk some more?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Steve Woodruff, the king of clarity. We will be right back after.